It's Mike Farrell from MikeFarrellSports.com. I always want to say that other place, but I'm not going to. And I'm with Timothy Bailey, College Football Frenzy on Facebook. Go find it, join it, post on it. He is also a writer for MikeFarrellSports.com. So check out the website. Before we get to the portal, I have to talk about a sponsor, RogueShop.com. So RogueShop.com for all your CBD, THC, aches, pains, sleeplessness. Rogue Shop, actually the first company to come to me and say, we want to sponsor you, even when you don't have any viewers or traffic. So I really appreciate them. And I will tweet out their link as well, but RogueShop.com, and put in Godfather 10 as your code, and you'll get a nice surprise little discount on there. I have tried their stuff. It's very, very good. Speaking of stuff, there's a lot of stuff going around about the portal. We've got finally Mr. Addison from Pitt is in. And, you know, there's rumors of this $3 million deal at Pitt matching and all this garbage. And I'll get to that garbage in a second because it is absolute garbage. But I wanted your take, Timothy, on what you've been writing and thinking about the portal, because we talked about it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so the transfer portal is really a system that probably unintentionally just benefits the big guy more than any other program. You know, in theory, I think when we thought about the transfer portal and some of these rules that we've put in place that allow intra-conference transferring, we're thinking of the Chandler Morris to TCU. Like, hey, this is a good player on a roster of a great team. Why, you know, now they're going to have an opportunity to take one of those players that didn't have a chance to play at that place and get somebody that's great. But for all of those kind of guys that, you know, that the little guy gets, the big guy gets better. Look at Alabama. Alabama was able to take Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech. He's one of the best running backs in the country. They were able to take an offensive lineman from Vanderbilt. It's basically become an additional farm system alongside, you know, high-level recruiting for these power conferences to find those diamonds in the rough that, say, a Matt Campbell at Iowa State's really good at finding. In a couple of years, the guys like the Breece Halls and the Alan Lazards at Iowa State will probably end up playing for the Texases, Alabamas, LSUs of the world, because the opportunities, particularly with NIL, are going to be greater and more prosperous typically at those bigger universities.
I get the point there. Now I'll counter with a couple of different situations, and just to give hope to people that you know, maybe there is some sort of parity out of this that can possibly exist. And this first one isn't a great example because it's Jermaine Burton going from a national championship team at Georgia going to a potential national championship at Alabama. But, you know, he had everything he wanted at Georgia, except for, you know, an elite quarterback named Bryce Young. He proved it there, he feels, and now he wants to prove it and be the Jamison Williams, you know, who also went from Ohio State, a great program, to Alabama. So, you know, it's not all just picking on the weak. There's going to be some very, very interesting transfers between power programs. But the one that kind of gave me a little bit of hope for college football this past week was Ocean Mathis. So he's a defensive end from TCU. He was down to Texas and Nebraska. His former coach, Gary Patterson, is an analyst at Texas. He's from Texas. Everybody expected Texas to get him. I expected Texas to get him. He chose Nebraska. You know, and a couple of people reached out to me that are close to the Texas program and said, do you think we really got out recruited? And the question confused me because with name, image, likeness, you would think Austin, Texas and the Longhorns brand would be much bigger than Nebraska's, but Nebraska won that battle. So I get where you're coming from. The strong are always going to be strong. I think that's not going to change in recruiting. I mean, if you look at recruiting rankings for the last 20 years, you're going to see the same teams up near the top. But I do have a little bit of hope that maybe a guy like that will choose the smaller program. And it's kind of funny to talk about Nebraska being the smaller program. They've obviously been down lately. But
sure.
I think that can happen. I think we can see fits like that where he looked at where he fits on the depth chart. Nebraska doesn't have a lot of depth there, and he wants the next year or two to be his NFL stock year. And I think that's the reason he chose it. I can't imagine Nebraska offers a better name, image, likeness opportunity than Texas for a Texas kid.
Yeah, no, you've got a good point. And even if you go with name, image, and likeness in the discussion, I mean, some of these guys that maybe wouldn't play at some of the, power schools are going to have an opportunity to maybe get more spotlight at some of these smaller schools. So in that sense, name, image, and likeness can help, I think, in that avenue. But even beyond that, I know that a lot of these players are going to want to improve their stock for the dream of playing in the NFL. And so I think that you're right there, that's not going to be everything. But we do see it playing a big factor that's helping bigger schools probably more often than the other way. And it is kind of funny with Nebraska, talking about them as a smaller school. I mean, it's crazy because they were just in a national championship like 18 years ago, so but
it's been over 20 now, believe it or not, but don't tell Nebraska fans that. And Texas was in one in 2009, and that seems like it was yesterday with Colt McCoy. But geez, that's been 13 years. So it's crazy how these blue bloods have fallen. Now, Jordan Addison's an interesting case here because I hear two different sides of things. Okay. So on the one side, I wrote that this is a money move, and I got a lot of flack for that, and the flack I get is not, just from fans, but it's from administrative people. If I say one thing about one school, the other school's ticked off, and that's just the way it goes. But he didn't lose his head coach, nor is he still there. But he did lose his offensive coordinator, Whipple, who's going to Nebraska. He lost his quarterback, and he lost his position coach. Coach Marion's at Texas. So I said he's the first legit true free agent because he didn't lose his head coach, like Caleb Williams lost his head coach, and Justin Fields and guys like that have left because they weren't getting a playing opportunity or weren't comfortable where they were. Right. But then I talked to some people, obviously they said this NIL thing is all blown out of hell, which I know it is. It's not a $3 million offer. There's no offer on the table. He's going to have to make his own way like Caleb Williams did out there, which is cut his own deals and make a lot of money, which he can do. But really, this was about his draft stock. Drake London going in the top 10, the opportunity for a big receiver to replace him at USC, to play with Caleb Williams, his childhood friend. He trained with Caleb's dad at his facility in Maryland. There's a lot of connections people are ignoring. And then the Xavier Worthy thing came out that he turned down a 7-figure deal to stay at Texas. And now all of a sudden he's a GOAT and a hero and all this stuff. And that's not true either. I think we're in a world of fabrication here, and I think it's going to get worse.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, if someone comes out with this figure, I mean, how do you verify it's true or verify it's not, right? It's a slippery slope. Obviously, somebody like yourself who has the connections can get in contact, but for the general and average college football fan, that's not something that they're going to ever know for sure is true or not. So yeah, I mean, there's another thing too here. If you look at Jordan Addison, he won the Biletnikoff last year. He also lost his quarterback, which is a fair thing to point out. I know they got Keaton Slovis, so they've got a guy that that's been proven to be a pretty good player there. But with losing the offensive coordinator, that's definitely something to discuss. And when you look at the track record of Dennis Simmons, the wide receiver coach at USC, who's developed guys and sent them to the league as first-round draft picks like Michael Crabtree or Marquise Brown or CeeDee Lamb, it does make a lot of sense from an NFL standpoint to go to USC for development, if that truly is, the motivation there. Addison right now is being mocked as typically a outside of the top 20 wide receiver selection in next year's draft, but certainly a really great year with a really good position coach could certainly catapult him much higher.
And the other thing I've heard is that, it's not just USC. This isn't a locked in done deal. I mean, there's the relationship there, all the things pointing to, wanting to play in a better offense, wanting to play in a Lincoln Riley offense, wanting to be, a Drake London play that role. Alabama's in the mix as well. And if Alabama's in the mix, Texas is probably in the mix too with his coach, his former wide receiver coach there. But we all assume he's going to end up at USC. I mentioned a name to somebody today, and he's not the same player as Addison as far as talent and speed, but Ty Freifogel at Indiana went from a guy that a lot of people were talking about, a potential second rounder heading into the season, who could move up with a good 40 time and a good season into, the first round discussion, and just fell apart because his quarterback play was so bad. And Indiana went from a 9-win team to a 3-win team. And, maybe that's what Addison sees, through spring ball. It's like, this team is not going to be the Kenny Pickett, offense last year. It's not going to be great. We're going to struggle. And maybe he's trying to protect his NFL, stock as well. So
right.
People don't consider that stuff, and what's going to happen is these fake numbers are going to ruin college football for a lot of fans. Cause you just mentioned it, right? I have the ability to sort of text and call some people and find out what's real and what's not. The average fan does not, right? They're going to see this money, the Tennessee quarterback recruits getting $7 million, which is, false. And they're going to see that the worthies of the world getting offered 7 figures and Addison getting a home and 3 million. And they're going to look at this and they're going to be like, turned off. Like, might as well watch on Sundays. Those guys are professionals. College football is not for me. And unless somebody really digs into this stuff, that's going to just hurt the average fan, and they're going to just gravitate away from college football.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say to the average fan is, let's just say we're in that fantasy world where guys are getting 7-figure salaries. I mean, are boosters seriously going to continue to pay quarterback recruits out of high school, in the theory that it was real, 7 figures if they get burned? And
they got burned last year. Spencer
right.
Rattler, Sam Howell, Derek King. These were all early NIL guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Quinn Ewers at Ohio State. All these guys, lots of money thrown at them. Quinn Ewers' Ohio State gear is garbage. Spencer Rattler's Oklahoma gear is in a landfill someplace. DJ Uiagalelei at Clemson was Dr. Pepper guy, right? He stunk last year and was very average and might lose his job. Derek King got hurt, very early. Sam Howell regressed. It's like last year was the perfect storm for name, image, likeness for the top names to sort of screw you over.
Right.
And some other guys emerge. The other part about this, I really want to know. Now I know, you cover the Big 12. Do people think Lincoln Riley is really this stupid to tamper with the top wide receiver short of Jackson Smith and Jigba in the country blatantly? Do they think he's that dumb?
Well, I don't know that. The thing was with Oklahoma, the compliance department is so ridiculous at the University of Oklahoma. That a lot of this kind of stuff where, you play in the gray area was not really a very strong possibility. Basically, after the Rhett Bomar situation, I'm sure you recall that, where Rhett Bomar and another starting Oklahoma player, they went and worked. Yeah. Fake job nonsense. You're right. Since then, Bob Stoops had wanted the compliance department to be at a higher level. And now it's kind of, it's a joke around Oklahoma, how ridiculous the compliance level is. I mean, it's absurd. So to play in the gray area wasn't really a possibility for Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. So I think that a lot of people, with the way that he left Oklahoma, they feel some sort of way. Oklahoma fans have projected that. And now when you're seeing this kind of stuff, and Lincoln Riley's now affecting, Clemson, because Venables comes over, and Lincoln Riley's now affecting Pitt because he's supposedly tampering with Addison. I think he's an easy target. And then, you can point out to why wasn't he like this before at Oklahoma? And it's like, oh, well, their compliance is crazy. There was no way to play in the gray area there. How fair is that? Obviously, it's getting a little crazy.
Well,
it's
USC,
getting a little out there.
They got in more trouble than anybody with the Reggie Bush thing and all the scholarships they lost. Their compliance department is not going to say, hey, Lincoln, welcome to USC. Here's the keys to the kingdom. Buy whoever you want. And that's what bothers me as well. I get that people can hate Lincoln Riley. All right.
Right.
That's fine. He's a villain. Lane Kiffin was a villain when he left Tennessee in the middle of the night. That's just the way it is. And he understands that, but he's not an idiot. He's not a complete moron.
Lincoln Riley is typically the smartest man in any room that he's in.
And he's not going to set the wheels in motion for a deal that leaks out before a kid even hits the portal. That's why I said earlier on Twitter, this is like a 30 for 30. If this is true, which is not, then this is a 30 for 30 in the future that we're going to look back on and be like, how can everybody be so stupid? So I think people just have to have some common sense and look at this and say, yeah, college football has this reputation from movies and recruiting of, bags and millions of dollars and all this other stuff. And now that it's legal, so to speak, people just assume. The worst investment I could possibly think of is $3 million in a house to Jordan Addison to come play for 1 year. It just makes no sense to me whatsoever.
It doesn't make a lot, especially when you look at USC's situation. They're not really built to win in 2022, and Jordan Addison could help them. Certainly, the Pac-12 isn't a strong conference, but to win a national championship, which is what you would want to do if you're going to sign an NIL deal for $3 million to a player and give them a mansion or whatever it is that they're going to give to him, that's something that you would do if he's the final piece that's missing from a national championship team. I don't think anybody would tell you that USC is a national championship contending team in 2022. Now, in 2023, maybe that's more believable because, you get a year, get some high school kids in 2 years, 2 cycles in the portal. But 2022, Jordan Addison certainly would make them a much better team. I mean, could you imagine Addison and Williams on each side? I mean, that's certainly, they have Gary Bryant. So there's some guys there for sure, and it would certainly help that team. But I don't think he's the missing piece to USC winning a national championship, and I don't even think Lincoln Riley would believe that.
No, they haven't been great in the trenches. They haven't had a great running game. They've made some moves there with Dye and in the portal, they've got some talent, but they're not a team that's ready to go up against the Bryce Young, Will Anderson, or the Ohio State CJ Stroud and Travion Henderson group. So, but again, if that were it, if it were about that, also there's other places where he could win a national championship, and there's other boosters probably would be willing to give him more money. So this whole bidding war, and listen, let's put it this way too. Pitt, let's say it's $3 million in a house. They can't match that. Pitt is middling. They borrow a facility. They don't win national championships. They don't go to the playoff. They don't have attendance. They don't have all of these things that you need, and they don't have the boosters that are going to say, wow, really want to keep this kid in Pittsburgh. They don't care. People care about the Steelers. They don't care about Pitt. So all of this is kind of an interesting day. I'll get to one more topic and then we'll wrap it up because I want these to be short. So you could have 3 new Big 12 teams, looking to settle and get out of their current deals. So what do? I mean, Oklahoma and Texas aren't going to leave early. What happens if those 3 teams are ready?
So I do think that it's possible for Oklahoma and Texas to leave early if the right conditions are met. In Oklahoma and Texas, they don't really have any real reason to leave early. I mean, they could spend that kind of money on other things. So it would take somebody else facilitating a deal that would allow them to leave, whether it be, something with the Longhorn Network. But let's say under the assumption that Oklahoma and Texas don't leave. Well, for 1 year, why not just have a new Big 12 North and Big 12 South and just have at it? I mean, who knows? Maybe, if you've got a couple of years left to try to maybe convince Oklahoma and Texas to change their course, show that you can put a good product on the field. Bob Bowlesby,
we all know those numbers. never going to happen. I mean, the SEC and the Big Ten have distanced themselves when it comes to money and TV contracts and all that stuff. I mean, this is about money. It's not about anything else. So they're not going to stay. But I will make this argument. Houston, UCF, and Cincinnati are better programs in Texas right now. And it's hard to argue against me. I mean, how do you argue against me? They had more draft picks. I mean, Cincinnati had $1 billion. Houston had more draft picks than Texas, and UCF is coming off that mythical national championship a few years ago, but they're a solid football program too. Texas stinks.
And UCF is the biggest public university in the country. They're a sleeping giant potentially in this sport. I mean, they're right there in Orlando, Florida, in the hotbed of recruiting in the country. And Cincinnati, let me tell you, the state of Ohio is a pretty good place to recruit some players too. So bringing in those programs, bringing in Houston to, replace, you're never going to replace the brand of Texas, but to keep a lot of engagement from the state of Texas, that's going to be great for the Big 12. Cincinnati, like I said, more recruiting grounds, more televisions on in the Midwest. And then of course, UCF to me is the crown jewel of this whole thing. BYU is a national brand. So
yeah, I think the Big 12 will, listen, you lose your two bell cows there, but it'll still be a very intriguing conference. And, the Oklahoma States of the world have sort of been overshadowed. And now it's time for them to sort of, I guess, step up and shine. All right, well, we'll wrap it up. Rogueshop.com, please visit them. They're nice enough to sponsor me and my website. It's MikeFarrellSports.com. What is your Twitter handle?
It's at Real Tim Bailey.
All right. And what is the Facebook page?
College Football Frenzy.
All right. What do you got? 17,000 on there?
Got 17,000 strong, trying to push for 20,000 before the kickoff of the season at least. And it's a lot of fun in there. We have the most engagement of any of the college football groups on Facebook. So come check us out, hang out with us for a while.
And it's a public group too, so that you don't have to approve.
It costs you nothing.
Yeah, right. It's free. So join that. Follow me, M Farrell Sports at Twitter, M Farrell Sports on Instagram, Mike Farrell Sports on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, wherever else. Thanks a lot, Tim, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks.